You stole this from me. She's screaming it over and over, loud enough for the entire neighborhood to hear. I just came back after 10 years away, and my grandmother's HOA president is having a complete breakdown in my driveway, waving legal documents like weapons, calling me a thief for inheriting my own family's house. This stranger genuinely believes the property belongs to her now. My hands shake reading the notice, 15 days to prove ownership or the county seizes everything. 15 days, while she's already convinced half the neighborhood I'm the villain. Comment below if you've ever dealt with a neighbor this unhinged. 10 years. Exactly 10 years since I'd left this quiet Colorado suburb for my software engineering job in Seattle. The voice message from David, my family's lawyer, had been urgent. Robert, you need to come back immediately. There are complications with Betty's estate. Complications. That word made my stomach drop. Betty had been sharp as a tack until her heart gave out 6 months ago. What complications could there possibly be? The flight from Seattle felt endless. By the time I pulled my rental car into Betty's driveway, my driveway now, the sun was setting behind the mountains. The house looked exactly the same. Same cream-colored siding, same black shutters, same brick walkway Betty had installed herself back in the 90s. But something felt wrong. The garden looked well maintained, too maintained. Fresh mulch, perfectly trimmed hedges. Someone had been here, and that made my skin prickle with unease. I let myself in with the key David had mailed me, and the smell hit me first. Lavender sachets and old books. Pure Betty. Everything was exactly as I remembered. The floral couch, the photos on the mantle, the kitchen table where she'd taught me to play poker. But there was dust everywhere, a fine layer on everything. Where was all this maintenance someone would later claim they'd been doing? Because if someone had been caring for this property, they hadn't been cleaning inside. That's when I saw the envelope on the counter, marked urgent in David's handwriting. My hands shook as I tore it open. A property tax notice, stamped in angry red letters. Final notice, 15 days to respond or foreclosure proceedings begin. $8,347 in back taxes. But that wasn't the worst part. Clipped to it was a second letter from the county assessor, and this one made me sit down hard. Outstanding balance, 18 months overdue. Additional note, ownership dispute filed by Martha Perez, HOA president. Claimant asserts no legitimate heir exists and requests that the property be classified as abandoned. Payment processing. Suspended pending ownership resolution. Let me repeat that. Someone named Martha Perez had filed a claim saying no legitimate heir existed. I was Betty's only grandchild, her only living relative, period. And here's the insane part. The county had suspended payment processing. Even if I had the money right now, they wouldn't accept it until this ownership dispute was resolved. Martha had created a perfect trap. Prove ownership in 15 days, pay $8,000, or lose everything. Oh, and you can't pay until you prove ownership, and proving ownership takes longer than 15 days. Checkmate. I pulled out my phone and called David. He answered on the first ring. Robert, you made it. His voice sounded strained, frightened. David, what the hell is going on? Who is Martha Perez? The pause that followed was too long. I can't explain everything over the phone. We need to meet tomorrow morning, first thing. But Robert, listen, don't show anyone what Betty left you. Especially not Martha. Don't miss that property tax deadline, and don't trust anyone in this neighborhood. Betty didn't. The line went dead. I tried calling back 3 times, straight to voicemail. The kind where someone actively rejects your calls. I sat there in Betty's kitchen as the sun finished setting, shadows creeping across the floor, and tried to understand what I'd walked into. 15 days. A claim that I didn't exist as an heir. A lawyer too scared to talk on the phone. And somewhere in this neighborhood, a woman who wanted my family home badly enough to commit fraud. What had Betty gotten herself mixed up in before she died? The county email showed Martha's claim filed a month before the deadline became critical, but that's not what made my hands go cold. It was the attachment, a document I'd never seen before, with a signature that looked exactly like Betty's handwriting. Exactly. I couldn't sleep that night. At 3 in the morning, I gave up and started going through Betty's things. Her bedroom smelled like her perfume, still something floral that made my throat tight. The bed was made with military precision. Her closet held her Sunday dresses, the good pearls, the sensible shoes. It should have felt like grieving, touching her things, but instead, I felt angry. Angry that she died and left me to face this alone. angry that someone was trying to steal what she'd left me. That's when I noticed the photo frame on her dresser sitting at a weird angle. It was one of my favorites, me and Betty on her front porch 10 years ago, the day before I'd left for Seattle. I picked up the frame to straighten it, and the backing was loose, shifting under my fingers. My heart started hammering as I carefully removed it. What fell out was a small velvet pouch. Inside was a silver key on a chain, not costume jewelry, real silver. The engravings tiny roses worked into the metal were detailed and expensive. Taped to the pouch was a piece of paper in Betty's shakier handwriting. For Robert, when shadows fall east at 4:30 in October, the truth shows clear. First National Bank, Box 347. Don't trust anyone until you see what I've saved for you. When shadows fall east at 4:30? A safety deposit box I'd never heard about. Betty had always been practical and straightforward. This cryptic message felt urgent, like a warning from beyond the grave. But there was more. Stuck behind the photo frame was a second note, dated 3 months before Betty died. Martha asked about my necklace 3 times last month, kept touching it, asking where I got it, if it was real silver and what it opened. I told her it was costume jewelry. She didn't believe me. Started watching me through my kitchen window when she thought I wasn't looking. I stopped wearing it after that. Robert, she wants something. Be careful. My blood went cold. Betty had been scared. Scared enough to hide this key, scared enough to leave cryptic instructions, scared enough to warn me. The chain had a worn spot from being worn daily for years. Betty had kept this key on her body until Martha's interest made her hide it. What was in that safety deposit box? And did Martha know it existed? At 6 a.m., a voicemail from David landed before I could call him back. He kept it clinical. Meet in person only, bring any documents I found, and do not disclose the key or notes to anyone on Meadowbrook. One new detail cut through the static. He'd requested the assessor freeze payment processing the moment an ownership dispute was filed. That wasn't routine. Someone asked for it. The moment I stepped onto the front porch the next morning, a voice exploded across the quiet suburban morning. I knew you'd show up, coming to steal what Betty promised me. A woman stormed across the lawn from next door. Late 40s, perfectly styled blonde hair, designer yoga clothes. This was Martha. She wasn't smiling. She was screaming loud enough to wake the whole block, and I could see curtains twitching as neighbors came to watch. This wasn't spontaneous rage. This was performance art. For 10 years you abandoned her. Martha's voice was sharp, practiced. Betty was like family to me. She told me this land would be mine. She promised it to me for taking care of her. She shoved papers toward my face. Caretaker agreement, signed by Betty herself. Giving me rights to this property in exchange for maintenance and care. Your 10-year absence means abandonment under Colorado law. You stole what should be mine. The papers looked official, with Betty's signature at the bottom. Except something was wrong with that signature. Betty's hands had trembled for 2 years, arthritis, and her signature had gotten shaky. But this signature was smooth, steady, too perfect. This looked like Betty from 10 years ago, not last year. I don't know who you are, I said, keeping my voice level, but I'm Betty's grandson. I'm her only heir. I have her will and every right to be here. Martha's expression shifted for just a second from outrage to something cold and calculating. Colorado law is very clear about property abandonment. 10 years of absence while someone else maintains the land? That's adverse possession, sweetheart. By the time the courts sort this out, that tax deadline will have passed. She turned and marched back to her house, but not before glancing at the phones filming from neighboring windows. She'd gotten her performance. She'd established her narrative. I looked across the street and saw an elderly woman standing behind her screen door, watching silently. Gray hair, glasses, cardigan. She didn't wave, just stood there with a notebook. Then I noticed the red light on her doorbell, a camera, recording everything. As our eyes met, she gave the smallest nod. Then she held up her phone and tapped it deliberately. A message. She wanted me to check my messages. Maybe Betty had left me more than just a key. Maybe she'd left me allies. I compared the pen pressure and stroke tremor against Betty's last year checks in a kitchen folder. Her arthritis left tiny stair-step wobbles on downstrokes and a blunt lift on the double T in Patterson. The attachment's lines were too smooth, baseline too steady, and the loop on the E was her decade-old flourish. Whoever signed this studied an old specimen, not the hand she had in her final year. I woke up to hammering sounds at 6 in the morning, not construction someone stapling something to my front door. By the time I threw on clothes and got outside, a white city vehicle was turning the corner 2 blocks away. Attached to my door was a bright orange building code violation notice with 3 separate citations. Unpermitted structural changes to front porch, $500 fine. Hazardous landscaping, blocking sidewalk access, $500 fine. Illegal occupancy without certificate of habitability, $500 fine. Each citation was dated yesterday, 1 day before I'd even arrived in Colorado. Violations must be corrected within 72 hours, or property may be deemed uninhabitable and subject to immediate vacation order. $1,500 in fines for violations that supposedly happened before I got here. Another deadline 72 hours, stacking on top of the 15-day tax deadline. Martha wasn't just screaming accusations anymore. She was weaponizing every bureaucratic system she could access. At 9 in the morning, a building inspector showed up, mid-40s, clipboard, confused expression. "Sir, I don't have your address on my route today. These citations aren't in our system. Who filed the complaints?" He pulled up the online complaint portal on his tablet and showed me the screen. 3 separate complaints filed by anonymous concerned neighbor with photos of my property attached. The photos showed the front porch, the rose bushes, and the mailbox. But the timestamps were from 4 months ago, June, long before I'd arrived. The woman down the street, he gestured vaguely toward Martha's house, has filed 23 complaints this year across the neighborhood. We're starting to flag her submissions. I'll mark these as invalid, but you'll need to formally appeal in writing. The appeals process takes about 2 weeks. 2 weeks I didn't have. Even if the fines were fake, the appeals process would consume time I needed for the property tax deadline. That was the point. Death by bureaucracy. The inspector left, and I checked my phone to find an email from someone named Susan Walsh. Subject line, "Betty asked me to save these." The body was brief. "Robert, your grandmother knew something was wrong 6 months before she died. She asked me to keep my cameras running and save everything. I have files going back 2 years. Starting with this one, trust the timing, more coming." Attached was a single photo, night vision, time-stamped 3:47 in the morning, last Tuesday 5 days before I'd arrived. Martha, with a measuring tape and wooden stakes, was moving property markers along the east fence line. She was in dark clothes, face clearly visible when she turned toward the camera. The action was unmistakable. Pull up the marker, measure, move it 3 feet closer to Betty's house, pound it back into the ground. I walked the fence line and found the markers exactly where the photo showed. Freshly painted orange, soil around them recently disturbed. Comparing them to Betty's old survey maps, they'd been moved a full 3 feet onto my property. 3 feet across the entire length meant Martha had stolen nearly 400 square feet of land. Standing there with photo evidence and survey maps, I made a decision that felt right in the moment, but was actually the worst tactical error I could make. Enough playing defense. Enough letting Martha control the narrative. Time to expose her publicly with the proof I had. I took photos of everything. Susan's night vision shot, the survey maps, and Betty's property documents. Posted them to the neighborhood community page with a caption, "Martha Perez has been illegally moving property markers. Here's proof with timestamps. This is fraud and trespassing. Hit post, feeling vindicated. Finally, evidence. Finally, exposing her manipulation." Within 90 minutes, the post was flooded with comments defending Martha. "She maintained that property for years while you were gone. Where were you when Betty needed help? Oh, right, Seattle. Typical out-of-state heir shows up to cause trouble and collect money. Martha is a pillar of this community. Shame on you for these accusations. Those photos could be edited. Anyone can fake timestamps. Where's your proof this is real?" 47 comments in 90 minutes. 39 of them are defending Martha. 6 said they needed more information. 2 supporting me, both from people who had moved in recently and didn't know anyone. I'd handed her exactly what she needed. Evidence that I was the aggressor, the out-of-town troublemaker disrupting their peaceful community. My proof looked like accusations. Her lies looked like hurt feelings. Then a man named Frank Morrison commented publicly on the post, "I'm the HOA compliance officer. I walked past your house this morning. Your trash bins were placed 5 feet from the curb. Regulations specify 3 feet maximum. Your grass exceeds HOA height limits by 2 inches. Both violations must be corrected within 24 hours, or you'll face additional fines. Let's all follow basic community rules before making serious accusations against long-standing residents." His follow-up comment got 43 likes within an hour. Martha has served this community with dedication for 12 years. She's been the HOA president for 6 years. Maybe Robert should focus on following neighborhood rules before attacking people's character. 3 more neighbors piled on with their own supposed violations they'd witnessed. The car is parked facing the wrong direction. The package was left on the porch past the 24-hour pickup rule. Loud noise after 9 at night, quiet hours. They were burying me in petty rule enforcement, making me look like the problem neighbor who couldn't follow simple rules, all while Martha's actual fraud property theft got defended as community service. My phone buzzed with a legal notification. Petition for protective order, filed by Martha Perez. Case number 2024-K-8847. Petitioner claims Robert Miller has engaged in harassment, threatening behavior, public defamation, and stalking. Petitioner fears for her safety and requests an immediate protective order. Emergency hearing. Tomorrow, Thursday, at 9 in the morning, District Court. If granted, respondent will be barred from all contact with petitioner and from entering property at 2239 Meadowbrook Lane for a minimum of 30 days, potentially longer. 30 days. If Martha got that protective order, I'd be legally barred from my own property for 30 days minimum, well past the 15-day tax deadline. The county would start foreclosure proceedings. Martha could swoop in as the interested party. Game over. Legal notification. Martha filed a protective order petition. Hearing tomorrow. And then I saw the listed witnesses, 3 neighbors I'd never even met. What had Martha told them about me? David Carter's law office the next morning felt wrong the moment I walked in. The family photos usually displayed on his desk, David, his wife, their 2 kids at various ages, were gone. Just empty desk space where frames used to be. David himself looked like he hadn't slept in days. Bloodshot eyes, skin pale, hands trembling as he poured water from a pitcher. He spilled some on the desk, but didn't seem to notice. Robert, I need to show you something before we talk about the property tax deadline. Before we talk about anything else. His voice cracked on those last words. He slid a manila folder across the desk with the resignation of a man confessing his sins. Inside were photos. David at underground poker games, cards in hand, chips stacked in front of him. The photos were taken with a telephoto lens through Windows surveillance photography. More poker games, different locations, different nights. David losing, David drinking, David looking desperate. Bank statements showing withdrawals over 18 months. $3,200, $4,800, $7,500. They kept going. The total at the bottom made me sick, $67,400. Credit card bills maxed out. Payday loan documents. A second mortgage on David's house that his wife probably didn't know about. And at the bottom of the pile, a single printed email from M. Perez 47 at the mail service to David Carter, .law at the mail service. David, I know about the gambling. I know about the debts. I know the amount. I know which loan sharks visited your home last month. See attached photos. Here's my offer. Help me with the Patterson estate, and this stays private. I don't want money. I just need time. Small delays in will processing. Small delays in tax notifications. Give me time to build my case. Do this, and your state bar license stays clean. Your wife never sees these photos. Your kids never know. You have 24 hours to decide. She approached me 14 months ago, David said, his voice barely above a whisper, right after Betty's first heart attack. Martha knew everything about my gambling, where I played, how much I owed, which loan sharks had threatened my family. She didn't want money. She wanted time. Small delays in processing Betty's will. Small delays in forwarding property tax notifications to you in Seattle. Small delays that would let her build an adverse possession case, file complaints, and create a paper trail that made her look like the legitimate caretaker. I thought if I just delayed things a few weeks, Betty would recover. You'd come back naturally, and Martha would back off. But Betty died, and Martha didn't stop. She kept pushing more delays, more small favors. By the time I realized what she was actually building, it was too late. She had me completely trapped. 18 months of delays while I sat in Seattle, completely unaware I was being robbed. That's why Betty's will took 7 months to process when it should have taken 6 weeks. That's why nobody notified me about property taxes falling behind. That's why the deadline felt so sudden. It was sudden, because Martha had been engineering it to hit exactly when I'd be most vulnerable. She'd been playing chess while I didn't even know there was a board. Martha made mistakes, David continued, pulling up his laptop with shaking hands. She's arrogant, and arrogant people get sloppy. Look, 6 months ago, she filed a preliminary ownership claim with the county using a fake address for service notifications. That's fraud. And here, she accidentally copied me on an email meant for someone else. A surveyor she tried to hire to adjust property documentation. The surveyor refused, calling it falsification. Martha fired him, but I kept the email. He showed me browser history screenshots Martha had accidentally synced to an email about scheduling. Searches for adverse possession Colorado 10-year rule, how to file building code complaints anonymously, and property fraud strategies. The calendar entries from Martha's synced schedule show Patterson property, final phase, dated 3 months ago. David's guilt was driving him to do what he should have been doing all along, find Martha's vulnerabilities, document her mistakes, build the counter case. He couldn't undo his 18 months of betrayal, but he could help expose the woman who'd manipulated him into it. While we were talking, my phone started buzzing with notifications. I checked the security camera feed from Betty's house. 3 official vehicles had arrived, representatives posting more notices. Water service suspension notice. Unauthorized occupancy reported at 2239 Meadowbrook Lane. Service suspended pending verification of legal residency. Reconnection requires proof of ownership and a $1 processing fee. Water will be shut off within 24 hours. Another notice from the county health department. Mandatory inspection notice. Complaint filed regarding septic system failure and potential environmental hazard. Inspection required within 48 hours. Failure to provide access, $1,000 fine, and potential property condemnation. And an HOA official notice. Violation of overnight guest restrictions. Unregistered occupant residing in property without ownership, verification, or HOA approval. Must prove legal ownership or vacate within 5 days per HOA bylaws, section 7.3. Martha understood that attention is a finite resource. She couldn't beat me in one big confrontation. I had evidence, I had the law on my side, I had Betty's will. So, she was forcing me to fight on 6 different fronts simultaneously. Tax deadline, building violations, water shutoff, health inspection, HOA occupancy, and property boundary dispute. Death by 1,000 cuts. Bureaucratic exhaustion as a weapon. My phone buzzed again. Email from Susan Walsh, with an MP4 attachment and a brief message. Robert, you're probably wondering why I'm not just giving you everything at once. Here's the truth. I didn't know if I could trust you at first. 10 years gone, suddenly back when there's inheritance money involved. I needed to see how you'd react to pressure. Each piece of evidence I send is a test. That post was a mistake, but you learned from it. You haven't posted again. That's good. Betty said you'd make mistakes at first, but you'd learn fast. She was right. Here's the next piece. The video showed more night vision footage of Martha, this time with audio from a parabolic microphone. Martha is on the phone at 2 in the morning. Yeah, the old woman finally died. Give me 3 months and the property's mine. The grandson hasn't visited in a decade. He's got no legal standing. Susan's email continued. Betty had me document 47 separate instances over 2 years. Trespassing, marker moving, and wedding business operations. This is number 31. You'll get them all, but not yet. Trust the timing. 47 videos, 2 years of documentation. Betty and Susan had planned this together, the evidence collection, the timed release, even anticipating my mistakes. A protective order hearing could bar Robert from the property past the tax deadline. Martha's text arrived at midnight. You're trapped either way. But there's a way out if you're smart enough to take it. A way out? What was she offering me? The court email arrived at 6:47 on Thursday morning. Protective order hearing. Case number 2024-CV-8847. Hearing postponed 24 hours due to scheduling conflict and procedural review requirements. New date, Friday 9 in the morning. Both parties will be notified by formal service. David called immediately, his voice actually cheerful for the first time since this mess started. The judge's clerk told me off record that Martha's petition was so sloppy it needed review before hearing. She cited threats but provided no evidence. She cited stalking, but you've only been in town 4 days. The judge wants her to resubmit with actual proof, which she doesn't have. It buys us 24 hours. 24 hours, not much, but maybe enough to build a defense. The judge's clerk told me off record that Martha's petition was so sloppy it needed review before the hearing. She cited threats but provided no evidence. She cited stalking, but you've only been in town 4 days. The judge wants her to resubmit with actual proof, which she doesn't have. It buys us 72 hours. 72 hours, not much, but maybe enough to build a defense. That same morning at 10 o'clock, I heard vehicles pulling into the driveway. First, a white catering van with Elegant Affairs Catering in gold script on the side. Then, a florist truck with Mountain Rose florals painted in pink letters. Then a large trailer marked Summit Tent and Event Rentals. Men started unloading equipment, chairs, tables, large rolled-up tents, sound equipment. They were walking around to the backyard like they owned the place, like this was routine. I intercepted the catering manager, a man in his 30s, carrying a large box. "Excuse me, what's going on here?" He looked confused. "Wedding set up for tomorrow night. We're with Elegant Affairs. Been doing events at Patterson Gardens for 2 years now. Beautiful venue. You must be the new property manager?" Patterson Gardens. Betty's backyard had a business name. The catering manager showed me his phone. A professional website with the header, Patterson Gardens, Colorado's hidden gem. The homepage featured professional photos of Betty's property. The rose garden is in full bloom. The stone patio she'd installed in the 90s. The sprawling east lawn where Martha had moved those property markers. String lights and trees. White ceremony arched by the roses. Below the photos, pricing information. Exclusive private estate venue for weddings and events. Capacity, 180 guests. Full-day rental, $8,000. Half-day rental, $5,500. Includes exclusive property access, parking coordination, setup area, and stunning natural backdrop. Contact property manager, Martha Perez. There was a phone number, an email address, and testimonials from happy couples. Martha was amazing. The venue is gorgeous. Best wedding location in Colorado. Patterson Gardens made our day perfect. A portfolio page showed photos from at least 30 different weddings, all on Betty's property, spanning what looked like 3 years. I scrolled through the website, feeling sick. This wasn't just using the property. This was a full commercial operation. A booking calendar showed events nearly every weekend from May through October. Martha had been running a wedding venue business for years, charging thousands of dollars per event, all on property she didn't own. The catering manager was still talking. "We've got the Clark Williams wedding tomorrow. Big event, 180 guests, full catering package. Should be beautiful." He showed me the contract on his tablet. Event, Clark Williams wedding. Venue, Patterson Gardens, exclusive private estate. Date, Friday, October 13th. Guest count, 180. Total fee, $8,200. Paid in full to Martha Perez, property manager. Includes venue access for 12 hours. Setup and breakdown. Parking coordination. Noise permits acquired. I walked around back, where the setup was already in progress. The transformation was underway. 150 white folding chairs are being arranged in neat rows facing a floral arch. The florist was wrapping the arch in white roses and ivy. Catering tables with white linens are being set up near the stone patio. Professional sound system with speakers on stands. Pathway lighting is being installed along the garden paths. The entire east section, exactly where Martha had moved those property markers, was being staged like a luxury venue. I checked the vendor permits attached to the tent setup area. Each one listed Business, Patterson Gardens, LLC, owner, Martha Perez. Location, 2239 Meadowbrook Lane. She had registered a legal business entity using Betty's address. Created an LLC, got business licenses. This was systematic, organized, long-term commercial fraud. I approached Martha as she arrived to oversee the setup. She was dressed professionally, blazer, slacks, clipboard, completely in business mode. "Martha, this is my property. These people are trespassing. The wedding can't happen here." Her response was smooth, corporate, loud enough for the vendors to hear. "Robert, I have a signed contract with the Clark family that was executed 3 months ago. I have my business license, properly filed with the county. I have liability insurance for this event, as required by law. I have noise permits issued by the city for this specific date and time. This is legitimate commerce being conducted on land I've maintained under proper caretaker status. You are the one interfering with a legal business transaction. You could be sued for tortious interference. So, I suggest you leave my work site before I call the police for harassment. The vendors were watching now, some filming on phones. To them, she looked like the reasonable business owner being harassed by an unhinged family member. I looked like the problem, again. That night, I pulled out the vendor contract the catering manager had shown me and took photos of it on my phone. That's when I noticed something I'd missed during the confrontation. In the margin of the contract, in faded pencil, barely visible handwriting, Betty's shaky handwriting, a single word: evidence. I photographed the pencil scrawl and the contract footer, then sent both to David with a note to subpoena the vendor's master copy. Chain of custody would matter. Betty's handwriting turned the margin into evidence, not decoration. Friday evening arrived like a storm I could see coming, but couldn't stop. The wedding setup was complete by 4 o'clock. 150 white chairs are arranged perfectly. Floral arch covered in roses and ivy. Catering tables with elegant place settings. Professional sound system tested and ready. String quartet tuning instruments. The east lawn of Betty's property, my property, had been transformed into a luxury wedding venue. At 5 o'clock, guests started arriving. Cars lining the street. People in formal wear walk around to the backyard. Women in cocktail dresses. Men in suits. Everyone was excited, happy, and completely unaware they were walking onto stolen property. The bride arrived in a white limousine at 5:30. She was stunning, perfect in a white dress, makeup flawless. Her family gathered around, taking photos. The groom waited nervously at the floral arch, adjusting his tie every few seconds. The string quartet began playing. Guests took their seats. It was picturesque, professional, and expensive. Everything a couple dreams about for their wedding day. And it was all built on fraud. I watched from Betty's kitchen window as the ceremony was about to start. The officiant took his position. The wedding party lined up. The music swelled. That's when I made my decision. I walked out the back door, across the lawn, straight up the center aisle as the bride was preparing to enter. Heads turned. Murmurs spread through the seated guests. I reached the front where the groom stood frozen, and addressed both him and the bride who'd just appeared at the back. My voice was calm, clear, loud enough for everyone to hear. I'm very sorry to interrupt your wedding. My name is Robert Miller. This is my property, my grandmother Elizabeth Patterson's house, which I inherited 6 months ago when she passed away. Martha Perez does not own this land. She has no legal right to operate a business here. You've been scammed. I'm sorry, but this wedding cannot happen on my property. The chaos that erupted was immediate and total. The bride started crying, mascara running down her face. The groom shouted, voice cracking with rage, "What the hell? We paid $8,200 for this venue?" Martha started screaming from where she'd been directing the photographer. "He's lying! He's harassing me! Someone call the police!" The bride's mother pushed through the crowd. "Is this a scam? Is any of this legal? Who do we sue?" But here's what made this different from every other confrontation. Everyone had phones out. Every single guest was filming from multiple angles. Not just taking photos, actively recording, live streaming, posting in real time. I could see phone screens showing apps I recognized, streaming services and video platforms. The disaster was going viral as it happened. Comments were already appearing on screens. "Y'all, this wedding is being shut down. The venue owner is a fraud. Most dramatic wedding I've ever been to." The digital spread was instantaneous and completely beyond Martha's control. She could manipulate neighborhood pages and HOA boards, but she couldn't stop 200 guests from broadcasting this catastrophe to thousands of followers. The vendors started talking openly now, no longer worried about professional discretion. The catering manager was genuinely angry. "We've done 6 events here in the past 2 years. She told us she inherited the property from the previous owner. We had no reason to question it." The florist was checking her phone nervously. "I have contracts going back 3 years, all listing Martha Perez as the legal owner of Patterson Gardens, LLC. If this is fraud, we could be considered accomplices." The tent rental supervisor. "She paid on time, had all the permits, and provided insurance certificates. We verified everything we could. This is going to be a nightmare for liability. Every vendor confession was being recorded by multiple phones. Every admission that Martha had claimed ownership was being documented and shared. 2 police officers arrived within 10 minutes. They looked confused at the scene. 180 wedding guests, a crying bride, vendors packing up equipment, Martha pointing at me and screaming about harassment, me trying to explain property ownership. Okay, everyone, calm down. Who's the property owner here? I showed my inheritance documents, Betty's will, and survey maps. Martha showed her forged caretaker agreement and business license. The officers looked at each other, clearly wanting nothing to do with this mess. This is a civil dispute. We can't determine property ownership on the spot. You'll need to resolve this in court. For now, the wedding cannot continue here if there's an ownership dispute. Everyone needs to leave the property, but the social media damage was already catastrophic. I could see it spreading in real time on people's phones as they filed out. Comments are flooding in on every platform. This woman is running a scam. How many couples did she defraud? I almost booked here for my wedding next spring. Holy moly. Someone needs to investigate Patterson Gardens, LLC immediately. And Martha's face was permanently associated with wedding venue fraud, her business name trending, her photo being shared by thousands of people she'd never meet. Frank Morrison, the HOA compliance officer, showed up as the crowd dispersed. Robert, you can't just disrupt community events. Martha has documentation of her caretaker role. This is a civil dispute. You're the one causing a public disturbance. Even with wedding guests as witnesses, even with Martha's scam laid bare in front of 200 people, Frank was still defending her. The community was divided. Some neighbors filmed from their yards, others shook their heads like I was the problem. Martha approached me as the last guests left, her voice dropping to a whisper, cold enough to make my skin crawl. You think this embarrasses me? You think viral videos matter? Social media doesn't matter. I have medical proof that Betty was incompetent when she made that will. Tomorrow you'll see. But as she walked to her car, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. She was smiling, actually smiling, not the smile of someone who has just lost. The smile of someone who's been playing chess while everyone else played checkers. What did she know that I didn't? She smiled like the loss didn't touch her, as if the board she was playing on was 3 moves deeper than mine. By morning, I'd learned what she'd reserved for the endgame and why the wedding was only misdirection. Saturday morning, I stood outside First National Bank at 8:45, waiting for the doors to unlock at 9. The silver key was in my pocket, warm from being held too tightly. My phone showed 11 days remaining on the property tax deadline. 11 days to prove ownership, pay over $8,000, and defeat whatever competency challenge Martha was preparing. The bank employee who escorted me to the safety deposit box room was polite but incurious, probably used to people accessing boxes after family deaths. The room was in the basement, cold, fluorescent-lit concrete walls, rows of numbered metal boxes. Box 347 was in the middle section. The silver key slid into the lock like it had been made yesterday, turning smoothly. The long metal box slid out heavy, packed full. Inside was Betty's war chest, a leather-bound notebook with her initials embossed on the cover, worn from handling. I opened it to find daily entries spanning years. June 3rd, 2021, Martha asked again about using the East Lawn for a small family event. I said no. She asked why I'm so protective of unused space. The way she measured my property with her eyes felt wrong. Another entry months later, October 2nd, 2021. Found vendor business cards in my garden this morning. Patterson Gardens, they call it. That's my name. She's using my property name without asking. Betty had been documenting Martha's behavior for 3 years before she died, tracking every suspicious action, every boundary violation, building evidence like a detective building a case. Survey maps with measurements in Betty's shakier handwriting showed the gradual fence movement over time. March 20th, 2022, the fence moved 6 inches. July 2022, another 18 inches. November 2022, another 12 inches. March 2024, final 6 inches. Total theft, 42 inches, 3.5 feet of property, stolen gradually over 3 years, so nobody would notice the change. Printed photos of property markers being moved, each with a timestamp and date in Betty's careful handwriting. Evidence number 1, July 14th, 2022, 3:47 in the morning. 17 photos total, spanning 2 years. Wedding venue contracts, photocopies Betty had somehow obtained. Martha's signatures on each one, payment amounts, and dates of events. 34 contracts total from 2021 through 2024. Business registration documents showing Martha had filed Patterson Gardens, LLC, using Betty's address as the business location. At the bottom of the box was a USB drive labeled in Betty's handwriting. Insurance for Robert. Listen first. Also, an envelope marked evidence forgery. Inside was a single sheet of paper, photocopied carefully with Betty's note dated April 20th, 2024. Found in kitchen trash April 18th. Martha came over to help take out the garbage. This was in the bag. Photocopied before recycling original. The copied sheet showed Martha's handwriting, practicing Betty's signature over and over. Elizabeth Patterson was written 30 times down the page, starting messy, gradually getting closer to Betty's actual signature. At the bottom, a practice wedding contract with Martha's perfected fake signature. Betty had written across the top in red pen, proof of forgery intent. Betty had caught Martha practicing forgery, photocopied the evidence before throwing away the original, and saved it specifically for this moment. Martha had been so confident that an 84-year-old woman wouldn't think to check the trash before it went out, so sure that Betty was helpless and oblivious. That arrogance was documented in black and white. I sat in that cold basement room, holding my grandmother's evidence collection, and I finally understood what she'd been doing in her final years. Not fighting, preparing, building an ironclad case that would survive her death. Every wedding documented, every marker movement is photographed, every forgery attempt is preserved. Betty had known she couldn't win while she was alive. She was too old, too tired, and Martha was too entrenched in the community. So, she'd shifted the battlefield too after her death, where evidence would matter more than charm. I held the USB drive in my hand, Betty's final message waiting. But before I could plug it into the bank's computer terminal, my phone buzzed. Text from Susan Walsh. Don't listen to the audio alone. You need to be sitting down for this one. What did Betty's voice hold that was so devastating that even Susan, who had been helping Betty collect evidence for years, thought I needed a warning? I looked at the USB drive, then at Susan's text, then back at the drive. Whatever was on this recording, it was the heart of everything Betty had planned. The final piece of evidence that would either save or destroy me. I slipped the drive into my pocket and left the vault room. I'd hear her voice at Betty's kitchen table, not under fluorescent lights. I drove back to Betty's house instead of listening at the bank. Susan was right. I needed to be somewhere private for this. Somewhere that felt like Betty. I sat at her kitchen table, the same table where she'd taught me poker and told me stories about Grandpa. Plugged the USB drive into my laptop. Multiple folders appeared on the screen. Photos with 847 files. Documents with 231 files, wedding evidence with 134 files, and one folder labeled For Robert, Listen First, with a single audio file dated September 3rd, 2024, 5 weeks before Betty died. I clicked play, and my grandmother's voice filled the empty kitchen. Robert, sweetheart, if you're hearing this, it means Martha made her move. I'm recording this on September 3rd, 2024. Dr. Harrison just left after my monthly checkup. My blood pressure is high, my knees hurt, but my mind is sharp as ever. He can confirm that. I made sure he tested my memory specifically and documented the results, because I knew Martha would try to claim I was confused. Betty's voice was exactly as I remembered it. Warm, but firm. The voice that had read me bedtime stories and later told me hard truths about life. Hearing it now, knowing she was gone, made my throat tight. I want you to know I'm not fighting Martha directly because I'm old and tired. I am tired, honey. My heart isn't what it used to be, but that's not the real reason I haven't stopped her. I haven't stopped her because she's dangerous in a way people don't see. She's patient, she's smart, she plans everything. She doesn't make mistakes often. If I'd confronted her 2 years ago when this started, it would have been her word against mine, and she'd have spun it as a confused old woman misunderstanding a helpful neighbor. So, I changed strategies. Instead of fighting, I collected evidence. Every time she moved a marker, I photographed it the next morning. Every wedding she held, I saved the vendor cards, got the contracts from her trash when she threw them away, thinking I wouldn't notice. Every lie she told, I documented it. Betty explained the property boundary theft, the gradual fence movement, and the wedding business Martha had built on stolen land. She detailed the forgery attempts. Martha practices signatures. I've seen her do it. I found a practice sheet in my trash can once when she helped me take out the garbage. She forgot I sometimes check the trash before pickup. I kept it. It's in the envelope marked evidence forgery. Betty's voice was calm, methodical, like she was giving a deposition. Robert, there's something you need to know about the property boundary. Martha thinks she's been so clever, moving the fence gradually over 3 years. The trick is knowing when to measure. Remember what I used to tell you about the fence? Measure when shadows fall east. I wasn't being poetic, honey. I was teaching you surveying. In October, at 4:30 in the afternoon, the sun is at exactly 43 degrees above the western horizon in Colorado. That creates shadows that fall due east. Those shadows don't lie. They show the true north-south line because the sun's position is predictable. I had to pause the recording because I couldn't see the screen through tears. Betty had been teaching me surveying techniques disguised as folksy wisdom, planning for this exact moment when I'd need to prove the true property line. I wiped my eyes and pressed play again. Robert, Martha is going to claim I was incompetent. She's going to say I had dementia, that I didn't know what I was doing when I made my will. Don't let her. Dr. Harrison has 6 months of detailed medical records proving I was sharp. I made sure of it. I asked him specifically to test my cognitive function on every visit and document the results thoroughly. I told him someone might challenge my competency after I died. He knows why. Betty's voice dropped lower, more personal. I'm sorry I couldn't fight this myself. I'm sorry you have to come back to this mess. But I'm giving you every weapon I have. Every photo, every contract, every piece of evidence. Susan has been helping me. She's been saving camera footage for 2 years. Trust her. The evidence will come to you when you need it most. There was a long pause in the recording, and just Betty's breathing was audible. Then her voice came back, quieter. I love you, sweetheart. I'm so proud of who you've become. Now go protect our family home the way I protected you when you were growing up. And tell Martha that she should have been more careful about what she said at my kitchen table when she thought I couldn't hear from the living room. My hearing isn't what it used to be, but it's good enough. I recorded some of those conversations too. They're in the folder labeled Martha's own words. I'm tired now. I think I'll make some tea and sit in my garden while I still can. Goodbye, sweetheart. The recording ended with a soft click. I sat in Betty's kitchen as the sun set, her voice still echoing in my head. She'd spent her final weeks recording evidence instead of resting. She'd used her last energy to protect me and this house. At 4:30 that afternoon, I went outside with Betty's survey maps and a measuring tape. The October sun was exactly where she'd predicted, 43 degrees above the western horizon. The fence post shadows fell perfectly eastward across the grass. I compared the shadows to Betty's map overlay on my phone. The true property line was 11 feet from where Martha's fence stood, 11 feet of stolen land. The shadows revealed what Martha thought she'd hidden. Physics doesn't lie. Betty had given me irrefutable proof. David called as I was taking photos of the shadow lines. Robert, I've been going through Martha's submitted documents for the competency challenge. Her expert witness, Dr. Carl Brennaniff, ran his credentials. His medical license expired in December 2018 and was never renewed. He can't legally practice or provide testimony in Colorado. And the medical records Martha plans to use? They're for a different Elizabeth Patterson who died in 2019 in Phoenix, Arizona. Different social security number. Martha didn't even verify basic information. She's desperate, making stupid mistakes. Susan texted as I walked back inside. Complete archive ready. 347 videos over 3 years. Every trespass, every marker move, every wedding setup. Betty and I documented everything. Time to release it all. Emergency community meeting. Martha called for tomorrow morning. Susan texts, she doesn't know about the audio diary. Don't tell anyone before the meeting. But that night, I saw lights on in Martha's house at 3 in the morning. Was she preparing something I hadn't anticipated? Sunday morning, 6 o'clock. I sat alone in Betty's kitchen, at the same table where she'd recorded that audio message, where she'd planned this entire counterattack from beyond the grave. The early morning light came through the east window, the same window she'd described watching Martha through. I played Betty's audio diary one more time, her voice filling the empty house. I'm giving you every weapon I have. She'd spent her final weeks preparing for this moment, documenting instead of confronting, building evidence instead of fighting battles she couldn't win. That patience, that strategic thinking. I finally understood it wasn't weakness. It was the smartest warfare she could have waged. The HOA Community Center was filled at 9:50. I counted 52 residents taking seats, the largest turnout for any neighborhood meeting in years. Martha had transformed the space with professional precision. Projector and screen already set up, PowerPoint presentation loaded and ready, printed handouts on every chair, full-color pamphlets with her version of events. Coffee and pastries at the back table create a welcoming atmosphere. Name tags for attendees make it feel official and important. Martha herself was dressed like she was giving a boardroom presentation blazer, professional makeup, hair perfect, holding a clicker for her slideshow. This was her show, carefully staged. Several people were already filming on their phones. She was expecting this to be recorded. She wanted it recorded because she thought she was going to win. Martha's presentation began at 10 o'clock sharp, her voice smooth and practiced. Thank you all for coming. I know everyone's busy, so I'll be direct. For the past 3 years, since Betty Patterson's health began declining, I've maintained her property as a good neighbor and community member. I've invested over $50,000 of my own money in landscaping, maintenance, and improvements. I've preserved the beauty that makes Meadowbrook Drive special. She clicked to the next slide. Before and after photos of Betty's property. The before shots from 2021 showed overgrown grass, weeds, and a neglected appearance. The after shots from 2024 showed a manicured lawn, trimmed hedges, and beautiful roses. The transformation was genuinely impressive. 3 years of dedicated maintenance, Martha said, letting the images speak for themselves. The next slide showed receipts and invoices. Landscaping services cost $12,400. The garden supplies, $3,200. Repairs and improvements, $18,700. Property management is $15,800. Total claimed, $50,100. All presented in neat columns with official-looking formatting. Another slide showed testimonials from neighbors, quotes displayed in large text. Martha kept that property beautiful. She was always so helpful to Betty. I saw her there constantly, working in the garden. The social proof was overwhelming. Martha had been building this narrative for years, collecting endorsements, documenting expenses, creating a paper trail that looked legitimate if you didn't know it was built on fraud. The final slides showed the caretaker agreement with Betty's forged signature zoomed in, official formatting, and legal language. Then screenshots of my social media posts, the property fraud accusations, the wedding disruption photos, all framed as evidence of my harassment. Robert Miller, who hasn't visited in 10 years, shows up the moment Betty dies and immediately starts accusing me of theft. He's filed harassment complaints. He disrupted a wedding ceremony. He's made my life a living hell for the past 2 weeks, all because he wants to profit from a property he abandoned. The presentation was masterful. Professional graphics, clean layout, emotional testimonials, receipts that looked real. If you didn't know the truth, you'd absolutely believe her. She looked like a dedicated neighbor, being attacked by a greedy heir. Frank Morrison stood from the third row, speaking with conviction. I want to say something. I've known Martha for 12 years. She's dedicated to this community in ways most people never see. She organized our neighborhood watch program. She volunteers at the elementary school library every week. She's the first person to help when anyone needs anything. Robert shows up after a decade and immediately causes problems. Accusations online, disrupting events, making wild claims about stolen property and fraud. Who's the real neighbor here? Who's actually contributed to making Meadowbrook a place we're proud to live? Several people nodded along. A few clapped. Martha smiled gratefully at Frank, playing the grateful victim perfectly. The room was visibly split. The front 2 rows were Martha's core supporters, nodding, some taking notes. The middle rows looked uncertain, shifting uncomfortably, looking between Martha and me. Back rows held older residents who'd known Betty, looking troubled but mostly silent. Susan Walsh stood against the back wall, phone in hand, expression completely neutral. Robert stands with a laptop. I'd like you to hear something first. Martha's confident smile freezes. For just a second, I saw fear flash across her face. She knew I had something, but what she didn't know was how much. The room went quiet as the first seconds of the recording filled the speakers. Betty introduced the date, her checkup, and the reason she was documenting everything. Faces shifted from skeptical to stunned before the first minute ended. Betty's voice filled the community center. Robert, sweetheart, if you're hearing this, it means Martha made her move. I'm recording this on September 3rd, 2024. Dr. Harrison just left after my monthly checkup. My blood pressure is high, but my mind is sharp. The room went completely silent. Betty's explanation lasted for 4 minutes. Her voice detailing Martha's deception, the forged signatures, the wedding business fraud, the gradual property theft, and the handwriting practice she'd discovered. Martha thinks I'm confused, but I see everything. She moves the markers at night. She asks about this necklace, this key. She doesn't know I watch her from my bedroom window. By the end, several people were openly crying. Betty's voice, familiar and beloved to this community, calmly explained how she'd been victimized. The emotional authenticity was undeniable. This wasn't Robert making accusations. This was Betty, from beyond the grave, speaking truth. Martha's face had gone pale. Susan stepped forward. Betty asked me to document everything starting June 20th, 2021. She knew Martha was planning something. Every doorbell camera, every security camera on this street. I've been saving files for 3 years. Here's what that looks like. She connected her phone to the projector. Video 1. Night vision footage timestamped 2:13 in the morning, July 2022. Martha, with a measuring tape and wooden stakes, is moving property markers. Her face was clearly visible when she used her phone flashlight. Methodical, professional. This wasn't amateur, she'd done this before. Video 2, daytime, August 22nd. Martha is meeting with wedding vendors on Betty's property. Audio from a parabolic microphone. You can set up here, here, and here. I own all of this property. The old woman is always asleep by 8. She'll never know. Video 3. April 2024, through Martha's kitchen window. She is practicing signatures with Betty's old Christmas cards. Writing Elizabeth Patterson over and over, comparing each attempt to the cards. Then, practice on a blank contract form. Video 4, June 2024. Martha is in a car meeting a man in his 60s. Audio clear. I need medical documentation that she had dementia. Can you provide testimony? How much? $3,000. Cash, no paper trail. Video 5, September 20th, 2024, the week after Betty died. Martha is walking on Betty's property with a clipboard, photographing everything. On her phone, audio captured. Yeah, the old woman finally died. Give me 3 months and the property's mine. The grandson hasn't visited in a decade. He's got no legal standing. The room erupted. Gasps. Several people stood up. The woman who had been sitting next to Martha in the front row moved to a different seat. Multiple people were now filming the screen, capturing the evidence being presented. Frank Morrison stood again, but this time he looked conflicted. Martha's right to question this. Video can be faked. We need independent expert analysis before we ruin someone's reputation. About 15 people nodded in agreement. They didn't want to believe they'd been fooled for years. Then Dr. Harrison stood from the back row. I'm Dr. Robert Harrison. I was Betty Patterson's primary care physician for 14 years. Betty came to my office on June 15th, 3 months before her death, specifically to make a notarized statement. She knew someone would challenge her mental competency. She wanted legal documentation that her mind was sound. He projected Betty's medical records. 6 months of cognitive test scores, all normal. Memory recall tests, all excellent. The notarized statement Betty made. I, Elizabeth Patterson, being of sound mind, do hereby state that Martha Perez has been conducting illegal business operations on my property without permission. Any claims Martha makes about promises or agreements are false. David Carter stood, carrying his confession. Martha blackmailed me for 18 months. She had evidence of my gambling addiction and used it to force me to delay Betty's estate processing. I was wrong. I betrayed my client and my friend, but I've spent the past month documenting Martha's fraud. Her expert witness, Dr. Carl Brennan, whose medical license had expired 18 years ago and was never renewed, can't legally practice. The medical records Martha submitted, they're for a different Elizabeth Patterson who died in 19 in Phoenix. Wrong person entirely. Martha paid this fake doctor $3,000 2 weeks ago. That's suborning perjury, a felony. The technical evidence was overwhelming. Expired licenses, wrong medical records, payment for false testimony, forged documents. Martha's fraud had multiple dimensions. Martha stood, defensive, shifting from authority to victimhood. Betty was confused. She told me contradictory things. I was helping her. Yes, I ran a business, but the property was going to waste. I was trying to preserve something beautiful. Hearing her mock Betty's age and use abusive language on video killed any sympathy. Susan played one final video. Martha and Frank were on Martha's porch 3 weeks ago. Crystal clear audio. Frank, I need you to keep citing Robert for violations. Every rule he breaks, I need enforcement immediately. The more paperwork, the less time for the tax deadline. Are these real violations? Does it matter if they're real? The goal is pressure. Every citation makes him look like a problem resident. Frank's face went from confusion to betrayal to rage. You told me Robert was actually violating codes. You said it was legitimate enforcement. I thought I was doing my job. I was being used as a weapon. He addressed the room. I've been an HOA compliance officer for 8 years. I enforced rules I thought were legitimate. Martha turned me into her accomplice without me knowing. I'm done being her weapon. The HOA board president called for a vote. All in favor of removing Martha Perez from HOA president and referring this to law enforcement. Hands rose. 44 out of 52 attendees. 6 abstained, uncomfortable but not ready to oppose. 2 voted against die-hard Martha supporters who still couldn't admit they'd been fooled. Motion passes. Martha, you're removed effective immediately. Martha leaving. Competency hearing, Monday morning. I still have one more card. Then she leaned close, voice barely a whisper. Your grandmother's doctor? Let's just say loyalty has a price. My blood went cold. What did she mean about Dr. Harrison? I wasn't done paying for other people's secrets. By morning, I'd learned the price tag had my name on it. Sunday evening, the night before the competency hearing, my phone showed 9 days remaining on the property tax deadline. 9 days to get payment processed through a government system that moves at government speed. Even with a court victory, I could still lose everything to bureaucratic timing. I sat at Betty's kitchen table, surrounded by evidence, her leather notebook, the USB drive, survey maps, 347 video files queued on my laptop, David's legal briefs, and Dr. Harrison's medical records. Everything was organized, labeled, and ready. But tomorrow's hearing would determine if any of it mattered. If Martha's fake psychiatrist convinced the judge that Betty was incompetent, all this evidence became irrelevant. The will gets invalidated. The property goes into legal limbo. The tax deadline passes. Martha wins by default. District Court, Monday morning, 9:45. Courtroom 3 was smaller than I'd expected. Just a judge's bench, 2 tables for opposing parties, gallery seating for maybe 20 people. The walls were wood-paneled, official-looking. Everything smelled like old paper and floor polish. Martha arrived at 9:50 with her attorney and Dr. Carl Brennan. The doctor was in his 60s, wearing a rumpled but professional suit, carrying a worn briefcase. He looked the part gray hair, reading glasses, slightly disheveled in the way academics often are. If you didn't know his license was expired, you'd believe he was legitimate. The gallery was filled with familiar faces. Susan was there, David, Dr. Harrison, Frank Morrison, supporting me now, a few curious neighbors, and a court reporter setting up her equipment. Judge Patricia Winters entered at 10 o'clock exactly. She was in her 50s, with a no-nonsense expression and a reputation for being fair but skeptical of both sides. Martha's attorney opened with practiced precision. Your Honor, we're here to challenge the validity of Elizabeth Patterson's will on grounds of mental incompetency. We have expert psychiatric testimony that Miss Patterson suffered from progressive dementia during the period when she executed her will and made key legal decisions about her property. We respectfully request that the will be invalidated due to lack of testamentary capacity. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Testamentary capacity. Legal speak for whether Betty had been mentally sound enough to make a will. If Martha won this argument, everything Betty had planned, everything she'd documented, everything she'd left me, it would all disappear like it had never existed. Dr. Brennan took the stand, was sworn in, and settled into the witness chair with the confidence of someone who'd done this before. Please state your name and credentials for the record. Dr. Carl Brennan, I'm a psychiatrist. I received my medical degree from the University of Colorado in 1984, completed my psychiatric residency in 1988, and practiced for 34 years before retiring. Technically true, he just conveniently didn't mention his license expired 6 years ago. Did you treat Elizabeth Patterson? Yes. I treated Ms. Patterson from March through August of 2024 during her final months. She was referred to me by her primary care physician due to concerning cognitive symptoms, memory lapses, confusion about time and place, difficulty recognizing familiar people. Can you describe her condition? Over 6 months, I observed progressive dementia. In March, she had mild symptoms forgetting conversations we'd had, asking the same questions repeatedly. By August, her condition had deteriorated significantly. She experienced paranoid delusions, claiming neighbors were stealing from her when nothing was actually taken. She couldn't remember her own property boundaries. She would tell me contradictory stories about her caretaker arrangements. The testimony was chilling because it sounded completely plausible. Dr. Brennan was hitting every medical term correctly, describing symptoms that actually exist, explaining things in ways that sounded authoritative. If you didn't know he was lying, if you didn't have proof he'd never treated Betty, you'd believe every word. The judge was taking notes, looking serious, concerned. This was exactly what Martha wanted, doubt about Betty's mental state. In your professional opinion, was Miss Patterson mentally competent to execute legal documents during this period? Absolutely not. Based on my 6 months of treatment, Miss Patterson lacked the mental capacity to understand the legal significance of executing a will or making property decisions. Her paranoid delusions specifically about Miss Perez suggest that any legal actions taken against Miss Perez would be the product of diseased thinking, not rational decision-making. A person in her condition cannot form the requisite intent for a valid testamentary disposition. The legal jargon made it sound even more official, more damning. I watched the judge's face, trying to read her reaction. She was writing notes, underlining things, looking back and forth between the fake doctor and Martha. This testimony was landing. It was working. Martha had found someone who could lie convincingly enough to destroy everything. Judge calls lunch recess. Reconvene for cross-examination. As everyone files out, I see Martha hand her lawyer a thick envelope. He opens it, goes pale, then nods. What backup plan had she just activated during that break? The lunch recess felt endless. David was on his phone in the hallway, making frantic calls. I'm calling the state medical board to get official verification. I'm calling the hospital he claims to have treated Betty at. They'll have no records. Give me 45 minutes. Dr. Harrison was pulling up Betty's complete medical history on his tablet. If Brennan claims her primary care physician referred her, I'll have records proving that's false. I never made any psychiatric referral, ever. They were actively investigating during the break, gathering counter evidence, building the case to destroy Brennan's testimony. This was David's redemption playing out in real time, not just handing over folders, but fighting for Betty the way he should have been fighting all along. Court reconvened at 12:15. David stood for cross-examination, and I could see the change in him. The guilt that had made him shaky and uncertain was gone, replaced by cold determination. Dr. Brennan, you said you're a psychiatrist. Are you currently licensed to practice in Colorado? I practiced for 34 years. That's not what I asked. Are you currently licensed? I'm retired from active practice, but my expertise... Your medical license expired in December 2018 and was never renewed, correct? Pause. Brennan looked at his lawyer, then back at David. I'm retired, but, Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence a certified document from the Colorado Medical Board. David projected it on the courtroom screen. License number, expiration date, December 31st, 18. Renewal status not renewed. Current status not licensed to practice. Dr. Brennan, you testified under oath that you treated Elizabeth Patterson from March through August 2024. Which medical facility did you treat her at? I saw her at my private practice. You don't have a private practice. Your practice closed in 2019. I have the business license cancellation here. I saw her at her home then. House calls for psychiatric treatment spanning 6 months. Did you bill insurance? It was private pay. Dr. Brennan, I've subpoenaed all psychiatric treatment records for Elizabeth Patterson from every medical facility in Colorado. There are 0 records of her ever being treated by you. No intake forms, no treatment notes, no billing records. Nothing. Your Honor, I'd also like to enter Elizabeth Patterson's complete medical records from her actual primary care physician, Dr. Robert Harrison. The screen filled with Betty's real medical file. Monthly appointments documented from March through September 2024. 0 psychiatric referrals made. Cognitive function tests are passed every single month. Notes specifically stating no signs of dementia or cognitive decline. David's final blow came with surgical precision. Dr. Brennan, I have your bank records. Martha Perez wrote you a check for $3,000 2 weeks ago. The memo line says testimony services. Did you accept payment to provide false testimony in this case? Brennan looked at his lawyer, panic visible now. I want to speak with my attorney. Judge Winters' voice was cold, formal, and angry. Dr. Brennan, I'm going to ask you directly. Did you ever treat Elizabeth Patterson? Long pause. The courtroom was silent except for the court reporters typing. No, Your Honor. Gasps from the gallery. Martha's face went white. Bailiff, please detain Dr. Brennan for questioning by the district attorney's office regarding potential perjury charges. This testimony is stricken from the record. Miss Perez, your attorney, I want both of you in my chambers immediately after this hearing concludes. Before the judge could rule on the competency challenge, Martha's attorney stood. Your Honor, regardless of the testimony issues, my client filed a property lien this morning for $53,247 in unpaid maintenance expenses, caretaker fees, and property improvement costs over 3 years. This lien clouds the property title and must be resolved before any ownership transfer can occur. The lien filing appeared on screen. Landscaping and maintenance, $31,000. Property management fees are $12,000. Emergency repairs and improvements, $10,247. All claiming Robert's property as collateral. Even in certain defeat, Martha was ensuring maximum damage. The lien would attach to the title, making it impossible to clear ownership before the tax deadline. Susan stood in the gallery. Your Honor, may I address the court? I have documentation directly relevant to this lien. The judge nodded. Every expense Martha claims in that lien, I have the actual invoices showing what those expenses were really for. Wedding venue setup fees, commercial event liability insurance, professional sound system rentals for her business. These aren't maintenance costs. They're business expenses she already deducted on her tax returns as wedding venue operational costs. She's trying to get paid twice for the same expenses. Susan projected the evidence. Vendor invoices clearly marked Patterson Gardens event setup. Martha's business tax returns show these same expenses deducted as business costs. You can't claim the same expense as both a business deduction and a personal lien. That's fraud. Judge Winters delivered her ruling with finality. Having reviewed all evidence and testimony, I find 1. Ms. Perez's competency challenge is denied. Dr. Brennan's testimony is discredited due to false credentials and admitted perjury. Dr. Harrison's records are comprehensive and credible. The will of Elizabeth Patterson stands as legitimate. 2. Ms. Perez's property lien is dismissed as fraudulent. These are business expenses, not maintenance costs. 3. I'm referring this entire matter to the district attorney for criminal investigation. 4. Robert Miller is the legitimate owner of the property at 2239 Meadowbrook Lane. All ownership disputes are hereby resolved in his favor. The county assessor is directed to unfreeze property tax payment processing immediately. Martha stood as bailiffs waited to escort her out. Her voice was flat, cold, not emotional. You can't keep me off public streets. You can't stop me from watching. She leaned in, implying the house wasn't safe talk of accidents and bad luck meant to rattle me. It was a chilling attempt to intimidate, not a confession. That property was promised to me. One day, somehow, I'll get it back. She walked out slowly, deliberately, escorted by bailiffs. Not in handcuffs yet, just detained for questioning. Not screaming or breaking down, but coldly determined, more frightening than any rage outburst. Judge's ruling, Robert is the legal owner, payment processing unfrozen. But as we're celebrating, David grabs my arm. The check processing time. He trails off, face grim. Then he shows me his phone and email from the county sent 2 minutes ago. My stomach drops as I read it. Tuesday morning, 7 o'clock. I stood outside First National Bank before it opened, waiting for 8 o'clock when I could get a certified check. The silver key was in my pocket, the key that had started everything, that had unlocked Betty's evidence, that had given me weapons to fight Martha's fraud. My phone showed 8 days remaining on the property tax deadline. 8 days to pay $8,347 and have the payment clear through government systems that moved at their own glacial pace. The county office opened at 8 o'clock. By 8 o'clock, I was at the window on the 3rd floor with a certified check in my trembling hand. I need to pay property taxes and ensure this process before the deadline. The county clerk was a woman in her 50s, efficient but bound by procedure. Certified check needs 3 to 5 business days to clear through our system. The deadline is 8 days away. That's 6 business days, accounting for the weekend. It should clear in time, but I can't guarantee it. Banks sometimes take longer. What if it doesn't clear in time? Then foreclosure proceedings begin automatically. There's no appeal process for missed tax deadlines. The property goes to auction 30 days later. After everything, Betty's 3 years of evidence collection, the community meeting exposure, the courtroom victory over perjury, I could still lose the house to payment processing time, a check clearing delay, a bank processing hiccup, one computer glitch in the county system. Betty had given me evidence to win legal battles. She'd prepared me for Martha's manipulation, but she couldn't control how fast a bank clears a check. This was the nightmare scenario Betty couldn't have planned for. Can I pay cash? For $8,347? No, sir. We don't accept cash payments over $5,000. Security policy. Credit card? We charge a 3.5% processing fee for cards, and it still takes 3 business days to post. Same timing issue, plus you would pay an extra $292 in fees. The clerk could see my frustration, but was powerless to change the system. I'm submitting your payment now. It will be marked as received today, but clearing is up to the banks, not us. Check back in 3 days. David called at 8:47. Robert, I pulled strings. I called the judge's clerk, explained the situation, that you won legal ownership but might lose the property anyway due to payment processing timing. She was sympathetic. I also called the county assessor director directly, bypassing the front desk clerk. Gave her the court ruling, explained Martha's 18-month fraud scheme that caused the tax delinquency in the first place. Emphasized that you're not at fault for the timing problem. Here's what I got. They'll accept your payment today and mark it pending with a supervisor override. If the check clears within 10 business days, which gives you a 3-day buffer, you're protected. They're documenting that you paid on time. So, if anything goes wrong with the check clearing, you won't lose the property. It's not standard procedure, but given the circumstances documented fraud, court ruling, timing through no fault of yours, they agreed to the exception. Relief hit me so hard I had to sit down on a bench in the municipal building hallway. David's guilt was still driving him to fix everything he could. He couldn't undo his 18 months of delays, but he was making damn sure no bureaucratic error would finish what Martha started. I also contacted 3 supervisors in the assessor's office and had them each send confirmation emails documenting the payment date and the special processing arrangement. If anything goes wrong, we have multiple people on record confirming you paid on time. You're protected, Robert. We've built redundancy into the system. This was redemption through exhausting administrative work, making phone calls, pulling strings, creating paper trails, ensuring protections. Not just saying sorry, but doing the grinding bureaucratic labor to prevent disaster. The waiting period was torture. Day 1, Tuesday. Payment submitted, status pending, check processing. Day 2, Wednesday. Status unchanged, bank confirmed check received by the county. Status pending verification. Day 3, Thursday. Status pending, clearance process. I checked the online portal every 2 hours. No change. Day 4, Friday. Status still pending. I called the county clerk. These things take time, sir. Should clear early next week. Weekend, Saturday and Sunday. No updates. Banks closed. Processing frozen. Just waiting. Day 5, Monday morning. I refreshed the county tax portal at 8:01. Status, pending, final review. I refreshed at 8:15, 8:30, 8:45. At 9:11, the status changed. Payment status, cleared. Property tax account number 2239-MLB-1940. Outstanding balance, $0.00. Payment received, October 15th, 2024. Payment cleared, October 21st, 2024. Account status, current, no further action required. Foreclosure proceedings, canceled. Property ownership, confirmed. Robert Miller, thank you for your payment. The relief was so intense it was almost painful. 7 months of fighting, 11 days of deadline pressure, 7 days of payment processing anxiety, all resolved in a single status change. Betty's house was safe, legally mine, taxes current. No more deadlines, no more ownership disputes, just done. I called David immediately, my voice shaking. It cleared, the payment cleared, the house is mine. David's voice cracked with emotion. Betty would be proud. God, Robert, she'd be so proud of how you fought for this. That evening, I sat alone in Betty's kitchen at the same table where she had planned this entire counterattack. I opened her leather notebook to the final entry, dated 4 days before she died. Her handwriting was so shaky I could barely read it. I'm tired, so tired, but I've documented everything. The key is hidden where Robert will find it. Susan knows her part. If you're reading this, sweetheart, it means I'm gone and Martha made her move. Trust the evidence. Trust the timing. But as I turned the page, there was one more line I hadn't seen before, written in different ink, like she'd added it later. My breath caught when I read what it says. P.S. Robert, you were always stronger than you knew. I love you. Now, go live your life in our house. You've earned it. While I'd been fighting the tax deadline, Susan had been busy creating a digital record of everything. She'd compiled a video series documenting the entire saga from start to finish. Part 1, showing Martha's public accusations, had 2.3 million views. Part 2, exposing the wedding business scam, had 4.1 million views. Part 3, with the courtroom fake psychiatrist revelation, had 5.7 million views. But Part 4, Betty's audio diary played for the world to hear, had 3.8 million views and 47,000 comments, most of them crying reactions. Betty was a genius. Your grandma loved you so much. I'm sobbing. The final part, showing the resolution and court victory, had 2.9 million views. Martha's face was permanently associated with HOA fraud across the internet. Future employers would search her name and find this. Future neighbors would recognize her. Every background check, every rental application, every job interview, this would follow her forever. The internet doesn't forget. 1 week after the court ruling, the neighborhood organized something beautiful. They built a memorial garden in the public park 3 blocks away, near the playground where Betty used to take me as a kid. 40 residents showed up with flowers, garden tools, and lumber. The people working hardest were the ones who defended Martha initially planting roses, digging flower beds, working for hours without speaking, physical penance through labor. They built 6 raised flower beds arranged in a circle, installed 3 wooden benches, and mounted a bronze plaque on a stone. Betty's favorite flowers are roses, lavender, and black-eyed Susans. The plaque read, "In memory of Elizabeth Betty Patterson, 1940 to 2024. Beloved neighbor, friend, and grandmother. Who taught us that patience and documentation defeat deception and manipulation? Measure when shadows fall east, the truth shows clearly. May her wisdom guide us toward truth." This wasn't about the property dispute. This was the community acknowledging that they'd been fooled. They'd defended the wrong person, and they needed to do better. Frank Morrison approached me privately during the garden construction. "Robert, I enforced rules I thought were legitimate. I trusted someone I had known for 12 years instead of questioning her motives. I made you look like a problem neighbor when you were the victim. I'm stepping down as HOA compliance officer effective today. I've held that position for 8 years. This community deserves better oversight than someone who can be turned into a weapon that easily." Frank's apology mattered because it cost him something real, giving up a position he'd held for nearly a decade, a role he took pride in. Real change requires real sacrifice. Sunday afternoon, 30 neighbors helped restore Betty's property boundaries. We removed Martha's false markers ceremonially, each one going into a box labeled evidence that David kept for the district attorney. At 4:30, we used Betty's shadow method, the October sun creating perfect east-west shadow lines. A professional surveyor confirmed Betty's measurements were accurate. We installed new permanent markers embedded in concrete, steel reinforced, and GPS tagged. The fence got rebuilt at the true property line. 11 feet of stolen land restored. Betty's rose garden was replanted exactly as she designed it in the 90s. 3 days after the court ruling, Martha posted a ranting message online, blaming everyone, claiming she was the real victim. The post got screenshot and archived thousands of times as evidence of her continued delusion. Her house went up for sale, but no offers came. Everyone recognized it from the viral videos. The listing was eventually removed. Martha moved to Nevada, legally changed her name, but her old identity was permanently linked to the fraud through millions of archived videos and news articles. The district attorney filed criminal charges: fraud, perjury, forgery, theft, tax evasion. Martha took a plea deal to avoid prison, 5 years probation, community service, a permanent restraining order, and restitution. $42,000 for the wedding business profits, over $8,000 for property taxes, $71,000 total in restitution and fines. Payments arrived monthly as her wages were garnished. I took the silver key and created a shadow box for Betty's kitchen wall. The key was mounted on velvet next to her photo from 10 years ago. Below it, an engraved placard, Elizabeth Betty Patterson, patient strategist, loving grandmother, teacher of the power of documentation. Measure when shadows fall east, the truth shows clearly. 1940 to 2024. At the next HOA meeting, the community established Betty's protocol's new rules requiring independent documentation for any ownership disputes, mandatory mediation, automatic legal review, and verification before enforcement actions. Her experience would protect future residents. Spring arrived, 6 months after Betty's death. Late April afternoon, 4:30. I stood at the restored fence line exactly where Betty's survey map said it should be. The fence posts cast long shadows eastward across the grass. Sunlight caught the silver key on its chain around my neck. I wear it now, the way Betty used to. The shadows fall east. The property line is correct. The house is mine. Betty's legacy lives in that shadow box, in the memorial garden, in the 347 videos teaching strangers about patience and documentation. She'd been playing chess while Martha played checkers, and in the end, Betty won. Even from beyond the grave, she won.